fact is that most people, even though the fantasy in dreams, in movies, in books, the idea of love forever after, when push comes to shove, many people say it's not realistic. I remember once giving a talk at the Learning Annex in New York City, and the topic was: is there such a thing as love forever after, or is it a myth? Myth or reality? 50 men and women combined that were at the talk. And I opened up with a question. I said, does anyone here believe in love forever after? I was surprised to see the response. 49 out of 50 people did not pick up their hand. Only one young woman did. I wasn't surprised they don't believe in it. I was surprised they would acknowledge it in public, especially sitting with their significant other. What does that tell you about the faith in your relationship? So we went around the room, like, why? Why don't you believe in it? And more or less the same idea. Yeah, when I was younger, first time I fell in love as a teenager, of course I believed in it. But then when I went through life, disappointments, a broken heart, betrayal, infidelities, I realized it's a matter of it's good for novels, romantic films, but it's not realistic. And each person had their own way of phrasing it. One person, I was waiting for a certain description, and someone said it the way I wanted to hear. Not that it was a setup, but it's really common sense. And the person said, of course not. Everything in this world is mortal. Everything perishes. Everything erodes and deteriorates and ultimately dies. That's the nature of materialism. That's the world of matter. That's how things are. Things age and are subject to those changes and ultimately disappear. So why would love be different? The food we eat, the money we make, our looks, everything goes through this process. So why would love be forever after? People nodded with their heads, and I said, what about this young woman who raised her hand? What do you tell her? I'd rather she learn on her own, but since she's already sitting in this room, she's young and naive and probably has not had her heart broken, has not been disappointed. So she still believes, and God bless her. And the theme of what I discussed, and I'll just encapsulate it here, was you're 100% right. Based on the logic of science, that everything in this material world ages, erodes, deteriorates, and ultimately perishes, the same would apply to anything that's material. However, is everything material in our lives? Is love another material experience? And this gets us to the heart of the matter. What is love? If love is another need, just like eating and drinking, maybe a more sublime one, then of course, then it's subject to the same rules of time and space. But perhaps love is more than that. So briefly, I explained, and I'm explaining now, that love actually consists of, as we all know, 3 types of compatibility. Most people identify. Say someone I love. You can love someone's physical appearance, physical attraction. Call it biological, call it sexual. The second level is emotional compatibility. You can love someone's look. You can fall in love with a model's face in a magazine, and then when you meet that person, there's no emotional bond. There's nothing there. And then finally, the third is intellectual compatibility. You share ideas, things you've read, perspectives, outlooks, frameworks. Now, those 3 are critical in a relationship. So I asked the room, I remember asking, I said, what do you think about that? Someone said, if I had 1 out of the 3, I'd be happy. 2 out of the 3 is a home run. 3 out of the 3, I don't even imagine. So I said, I'd like to introduce a 4th level of compatibility. Let's call it spiritual compatibility. And what is that? That is beyond the physical, the emotional, and the intellectual, and the cognitive. It's you share a vision together. A vision that transcends both of you as individuals. What kind of mark you want to leave in this universe? What kind of home? What kind of aura and vibe when people come into your home? What kind of children do you want to bring into this world? What values? And I explained, and I said, the first three, as important as they are, they change. Physical looks will change. No matter how much cosmetic surgery or different maneuvers or gimmicks we use. Emotional stimulation, sometimes the person you know so well gets boring. That's why we easily get emotionally stimulated by a stranger, by someone else. And the same thing with intellectual compatibility. They're all subject to change, as important as they may be. The fourth one, we'll call it spiritual compatibility. Transcendent compatibility is precisely that. It transcends. And that does not change whether you're 20, 30, 40, or 90. And if you look at people who are together for a long time, and I'm not talking about a marriage of convenience for some other external reason, then the sparkle is still there. It's because the transcendent component was activated. So they change in, obviously, a person physically changes and emotionally, intellectually change, but the fundamental foundation doesn't change because that vision is still there. Visions don't change. They just change how they manifest and how you express them and how energetic you may be physically to realize them, because it's transcendent by nature. That's spiritual compatibility. That's what we call soulmates. And that's where you find the secret to eternity. Call it a eternal edifice. In Hebrew there's a word, binyan adayad, a doubly eternal edifice. That's only when you introduce eternity into it. And that can only be possible if both individuals, I don't like the word surrender always sounds bad these days, but they surrender, they accept, they dedicate themselves, let's use dedication, to a cause, to something greater than the sum of the parts. And not in any way does that, God forbid, obliterate their individuality. It enhances it and elevates it. And this we learn the secret from the patriarchs and matriarchs of the Bible, the best-selling book in history. And there's a reason we still can talk about Abraham and Sarah of the Bible and Isaac and Rebekah. It's almost 3,800 years since they lived on this earth. And we know exactly where they lived and where they walked and how they met and how they dated and where they're buried, because they carried that secret of eternity. How they dated. So let's talk about the dating process of a young couple called Isaac and Rebekah almost 4,000 years ago. How many people can you say can trace their lineage, can say, let's talk about someone that many years ago? We don't even know one generation, 2 generations ago. We barely have a few stories here and there from our great-grandparents. So this story is exactly that. Rebekah, Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, finds this gem of a woman and feels that she's the right one for Isaac. And she returns with him. She comes from similar family DNA as Abraham, and that's why Eliezer went to travel to this town where Abraham originated from. Rebekah arrives, and they first meet. And the first thing he sees, these virtues. He sees these virtues in here. He sees a flame that burns from Friday to Friday, all week. He sees a blessing in her dough, the food that she prepares. And he sees a cloud hovering over the tent, over her, an aura. Now, what is the flame? What is the dough? What does the cloud represent? They represent the 3 fundamental elements in every healthy and eternal and functional, more than functional, thriving relationship that allows it to be sustainable and forever, as it was with Rebekah and Isaac, and as it can be recreated today. What are the 3 fundamentals? The first is a flame. What is a flame? A flame is a physical entity that defies gravity. It's the only thing we can see with our eyes that defies gravity. It rises, it flickers, it warms, and it illuminates. And indeed, the soul is compared to a flame, the soul of a human being, the flame of God, divine flame. So the closest approximation to what your soul looks like, in contrast to your body, is a flame. So think of a flame, it's always looking up, always optimistic, always hopeful, looking to the future. Doesn't look down. A famous story of one of the Hasidic Rebbes. He was a child playing on a ladder with other children, and they were all afraid to climb to the top of the ladder. He climbed to the top. Later, his grandfather was watching, said to him, "Why were you the only one that had the courage to climb to the top of the ladder?" And he responded, "Zayd, Grandpa, because as the other children were climbing, they kept looking down. They saw how high they were. They were afraid to go higher. As I was climbing, I kept looking up, and I saw how low I was. So it motivated me to climb higher." In life, when you look down, you look at your past accomplishments, you look at those that have done less than you, it makes you feel great. It's not a great motivation, but then you look at people who've accomplished more. You look at what's possible to do, not just what was done. So in a sense, a healthy form of competitive juices gives you that angst that's necessary to propel you to new levels of excellence. That's a flame. And that's why, indeed, the basis of a home is you light a Shabbos candle right before Shabbat, a flame. And who lights it? The woman of the house. So he saw Rebecca, and he saw, this is a woman of flames, of fire, of transcendence, of reaching upward, of illuminating, of warming her environment. And even though you light it on Friday, it burns all week. It has that power. It's not just a temporary flame. That's who I want in my life. That's what kind of fire I want. I want an eternal flame like that. And the Shabbat is a day of sanctity, sanctifying our mundane lives with the warmth and the fire and the illumination of a small little flame. And a little flame, a little light dispels much darkness, automatically and naturally, without a battle. The second feature he saw was a blessing in her dough. Now, we think of dough, okay, you break bread, challah, matzah, whatever it is you do with dough. Pretty mundane activity, everybody needs to eat. But eating also can be a sacred act. It's one thing when you're praying, you're meditating, you're in a spiritual zone. So then, of course, that's conducive to spirituality. But in real life, you don't just want spirituality on weekends or when you escape to a mountain. You want it in the mundane day-to-day routines, including your meals, that when you're sitting at a meal, a simple meal, we're not talking about a holiday meal, we're not talking about a Shabbat meal, we're not talking about anything special, a Thanksgiving dinner or some party, simple meal. That's where you see the powerful secrets of seeds of eternity planted. Quiet conversation is more romantic at times by a simple meal than the fireworks of glaring and loud. I'm not saying that it doesn't have value at times to have that as well, but it's not the wedding night, it's after the honeymoon. The simple ability to have a meal in a warm and beautiful way. He saw that blessing. And that's why the second pillar in a home is the food that you eat. Kosher food, food that you care about. You don't just buy anything, you don't just put anything into your mouth. It's not just kosher I'm talking about physically, I'm talking about kosher also in spirit. That you're sensitive to what you ingest. You are what you eat, as they say. You assume what you consume. And you eat with a certain sensitivity, recognizing that you're consuming another form of life, whether it's mineral, vegetable, or animal, but not just for your own indulgence, but in order, as the Kabbalists put it, to elevate the sparks. So then that food joins you as it becomes part of your flesh and blood in being a more beautiful person, in building a more beautiful relationship, in being kinder, gentler, more sensitive, more compassionate, and empathetic to others. And then finally, the cloud. A cloud represents a type of aura, a vibe. You don't ingest it like you do food. Not like the flame, which has its own aura and power, but it's a cloud. A cloud that hovers above. Remember, transcendence. And that's the third pillar, the area how your sexuality, which is such a critical component, part and parcel of a good relationship, and I'll call it intimacy. That's why we use the word cloud. It's not just sexual behavior. It's not just technique. It's the spirit of it. That's where you shall see both the most beautiful parts of a relationship or the ugliest parts. Bedroom politics, sometimes it's called. And it's not just whether two people can give each other pleasure and enjoy each other, it's that they can transcend and become more than the individual as they dissolve into one. The cloud envelops them both. And that's what he saw. Even though he obviously was not intimate yet with Rebecca, but he saw the personality, he saw the modesty, he saw the look. That on one hand, a very powerful, intimate nature that she had, but also with discretion, not flaunting it. One of the big tragedies of our time. Sexuality has become an end in itself. Its power is in its mystique, not in trying to eliminate the mystique. Its power is in its mystique, and that means its power is sometimes in its subtlety. And that's what he recognized. And that was the third component. So there you have the three ingredients of eternal love. The flame, the dough, and the intimacy, and the cloud. When you have that, you will have forever. What's the contrast? A relationship that's built on material things, money, possessions, travel, going out to eat, parties. No one's denying the value of that. But that's not the foundations of your building. The foundations of your building that keep everything standing strong and is unwavering are the eternal values. Not how you perform, not what you're doing, but who you are. And these are the three ingredients of what defines who you are, what you value, what you consider to be vital. The foundations. The floors above can be beautiful, but without a foundation, the building will not stand. So that's what we learn from the Rebecca and Isaac story. Each of us can apply in our own personal lives. Obviously, this deserves much more discussion, so please check it out at meaningfullife.com. More details on each of these three items. 3 items sounds a little simple. 3 foundations, I will call them. These 3 elements, and how you can apply that in your own life. If you have a copy of my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, especially the chapter on intimacy, describes very personally the way to bring intimacy into your sexuality, to bring that soul, the soul into it all. And that's the common denominator of all 3 of them, the flame, the dough, and the cloud, the soul within a relationship. Not just the body, not just the mechanics, but the spirit within. Thank you so much. Simon Jacobsner, meaningfullife.com. Please check it out. The website, an array of many different programs, including this one. I'd love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your questions, your comments. And please share. Please share with anyone you see fit if you found this meaningful. Thank you so much. Until next time, be well.